I wasn't getting out of bed.
I wasn't going to work.
I hid my problems from everyone.
I didn't want people to judge me.
I watched my daughter suffering.
I didn't know what to do.
Because you joined the conversation, we know we are not alone.
We are not weak.
We are not ashamed.
We are strong.
And help is out there. We need to ask for it. Join the conversation. Visit letstalkstigma.org.
Hello, I'm Karl Shallowhorn, board member for the Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition. And on behalf of the coalition, I would like to welcome you to the 7th in our series of Facebook Live events, this time focusing on the state of stigma, depression, screening, and seeking treatment. Major depressive disorder is one of the most common mental health conditions in the United States. Here are a few quick facts according to the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. It's the leading cause of disability in the United States for ages 15 to 44. Major depressive disorder affects more than 16.1 million Americans, or about 6.7% of the U.S. population age 18 and older in a given year. While major depressive disorder can develop at any age, the median age of onset is 32 and a half years old, and it's more prevalent in women than in men. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated people's symptoms of depression as seen individuals develop this condition even if they never had it before, which is all more reason to raise awareness about how to seek help. So today we're going to be exploring this topic with 3 individuals who have different perspectives. Before I introduce our panelists, here are a couple of housekeeping rules. Our program is for 1 hour. During the course of this time, if you have a question or comment, please type it into the text box and we will respond accordingly. Today, I'm first joined by Josh Magier, who is a psychiatric care manager at the Erie County Medical Center. Josh began his career at Crisis Services and worked in their mobile transitional support program, providing support to individuals who are psychiatrically hospitalized at ECMC, assisting them in sustaining linkage and supporting them following their hospitalization. He's very passionate about his work, which led him to ECMC in their newly formed Health Center in 2018. About 1 year ago, in October of 2020, Josh transitioned to a new position in the same clinic at the hospital, working as a therapist in their Navigate program, which is a specialty outpatient program for individuals experiencing a first episode of psychosis from ages 15 to 30. In addition to that, he works with clients in their general adult and family crisis clinic for ongoing outpatient therapy. Josh has an undergraduate degree in psychology and early childhood education and a master's degree in social work. Next, we have Stasio, who is the president of the board of directors of SANYS, the Self-Advocacy Association of New York State, a position in which he was elected by his fellow self-advocates and peers around New York. He's also been employed by OPWDD, the Office for Persons with Developmental Disabilities, for over 20 years, working on person-centered planning, voting issues, and self-determination training and education. Additionally, he has served on the board of the National Federation for Just Communities of West New York, the Disability History Museum Board, and as a nonprofit organization, Buffalo Racing, focused on getting people with disabilities involved in 5K races. BJ has been actively involved with direct advocacy to OPWDD during this public health crisis on behalf of SANYS, representing the voices of self-advocates across New York State. Last, but certainly not least, we're joined by Kelly Miskovski, who is the Director of Community Outreach and Information and Referral at the Mental Advocates of West New York. She's worked in the mental health field for over 10 years. Kelly specializes in helping individuals and families navigate the mental health system by providing information and linkages to community resources. She also oversees MHA's mental health screening program. Kelly has a master's degree in psychology from Medaille College. Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to begin with a question for all of you. And it's a general question, but it's one that needs to be discussed. So depression is the number one cause of stigma in the workplace as far as absenteeism is concerned. But there's still so much stigma that we see. Why do you think we have the case of stigma in the workplace when it comes to absenteeism and workplace in general? So I'm going to start with Josh. Why do you think, Josh?
Sure, and thank you so much for having me today. Really, stigma with regard to depression in the workplace comes about so much because I feel like there is an understood idea that we all should be able to deal with whatever struggles we might have at home or outside the workplace or even within the workplace and just come anyway, deal with it on our own, and it's almost a non-valid reason for not being able to work, even though that is not the case, and it can affect us even more significantly than medical conditions or other issues that we might be dealing with. But for some reason, for many years, it was just viewed as something that it's not a good reason. You should just be able to deal with it anyway, even though it requires legitimate treatment and resources to help with in many cases. And that stigma just needs to be fought, and that's why I'm glad we're having this panel to debunk some of the myths around that and open up resources to individuals.
Great, thanks for leading us off, Josh. How about you, BJ? What do you think about this idea of stigma in the workplace?
Well, for me, on a personal level, I have moderate depression. I don't mind saying so, but also having a developmental disability creates its own stigma. And when you're in a workplace where it's still very tough for you to be accepted as an equal, and you have depression on top of it, it's almost like, I'm not feeling good today, so we need to treat him with kid gloves. No, you need to ask me what's wrong and help me deal with it so I can identify it. And I didn't have that support. So now that I identified it, I'm getting the help I need. So it's important not to treat people differently just because they have depression. Ask people what's going on. Just don't ignore it and pretend it'll go away, because it doesn't. You just have to learn to deal with it.
Would you be willing to share, and I don't want to get too personal, but would you be able to share an example of maybe when someone might have been in a situation where they may have not known how to ask the right question?
Sure. It's like, if I'm silent, there's something going on, and people don't know how to deal with me when I'm silent, because when I was really depressed, I was down, I wouldn't talk to anybody, I would just stay in my office, focus on the work. I wouldn't connect with people. So that was the wrong thing for somebody to do, because I didn't know how to reach out for the help that I needed. I didn't know I had a problem. I thought I was just having a bad day, but when it lingered and got worse, it made my environment worse. And just not asking creates the stigma. And I wish I had asked for help and known, because, like I said, it's bad enough having a disability and having that obvious stigma. Depression was my secret stigma, right? Because I didn't share it with anybody and nobody ever asked. So please, if you think somebody's having a bad day and it carries on for a long time, there's something going on. So just ask what's going on to engage in the discussion, because maybe you can be a help instead of being an enabler with the depression.
That is a very profound statement. Be a help and not an enabler. I like that. So Kelly, what is your feeling about this as far as being in the workplace?
I do think that depression is still a very misunderstood diagnosis, and there's so many misconceptions. People might think that depression is a choice and you can just choose to not feel depressed and be happy instead, but they're really misunderstanding what it looks like, what the symptoms are, and they can manifest in many different ways. But also, I think that there's many workplaces that are not properly educated on mental health diagnoses. And if you're a person that works for a company like this, you might be afraid to disclose to your manager that you are dealing with depression and fear that you might be treated differently, or you might not be considered for an advancement, or even let go, perhaps. So I think it's important to have ongoing and consistent education regarding mental health in the workplace, and that would help to eliminate this ongoing stigma.
That's really important, Kelly. And of course, we've seen in many examples, I know if you look at Business First, for instance, our local publication, they do highlight some businesses and organizations that use wellness programs and other types of programs to address these issues. Plus, there's EAP and things like that. We've talked about that in other forums and other Facebook Lives. I do want to ask Josh, though, to follow up what Kelly said about signs, symptoms. Of course, you're a clinician. So what should people be looking for as far as the signs, symptoms of depression? And how does that play into the stigma that she was talking about?
Absolutely, and education is so key. So it's good to look at what are some signs, symptoms, things to be aware of, because oftentimes depression does not happen all at once. It is a series of symptoms over a course of period of time. And so, for example, if we're talking about mentally, difficulty concentrating, difficulty focusing on tasks that normally would not be an issue to deal with, so being distracted. Also, in terms of energy level, that may go down, be less likely to be able to do the normal amount of activities that one might do during the day. Physically feeling more tired, a desire to be more sedate, or isolating from other people is a big one. So, for example, even conversations that are normally easy to manage all of a sudden become a big obstacle in someone's way. And that leads to the isolating, the I would prefer to be away from other people kind of feeling, which unfortunately then perpetuates the entire cycle, because the more we're away from people, the more we feel comfortable in that low state of emotion and energy. And then sometimes even being irritable. So that is sometimes misunderstood as angry or another problem, but really it fits in with depression as being more irritable. Things bother us more easily when we are depressed. And then physically, we tend to take care of ourselves less well. Normally, we have a typical routine we may follow in terms of hygiene, in terms of activities that we do, such as eating, sleeping, and those all become different than usual. We may have less energy to take care of ourselves, so showering might reduce. We might be eating too little or too much, potentially, either to self-soothe or just we don't feel like caring for ourselves. So there are some physical symptoms as well that go along with it.
And just as a quick follow-up, Josh, so we know sometimes you might be feeling some of these, doesn't mean that you have depression. And also, how long of amount of time are we looking at to have these symptoms, maybe to seek help? And then what would be the step you take maybe to seek that help? What would you do?
Sure. And you make a good point with the length of time. So we're not talking about I had a bad day at work one day and I'm feeling not so great that day, because we all would have a very normal reaction to something like that. But we were talking about prolonged symptoms. We're talking about they're having a significant impact on our regular functioning. So not just I'm feeling this way and I'm pushing through, but really there is a noticeable difference in what we're able to do for ourselves. And the seeking help, we would start in by not having to deal with that alone. Now, everyone is different with this, but it's good to educate about the options. So whether that's even speaking to a trusted person in our lives, not just keeping it all in, does not have to start with formal therapy necessarily. We would start by having a conversation with trusted people. We would then potentially go on to seeking more formal support, because oftentimes with depression, and that goes with stigma as, oh, we should all somehow take care of it on our own. And it's not easily seen, like BJ was discussing. It's a very sometimes hidden issue. It's not obvious, yet it's very serious. And so talking with a professional who is not in our lives can really help get some of that out, because it's a burden we carry. And that can be very heavy, both physically heavy and also emotionally heavy. So we'd want to be speaking with other people. But I understand it's not easy to go straight into speaking with a stranger about emotional problems. You might want to start by speaking with someone trustworthy in your life. But if you don't have that person or don't feel comfortable, that's what professionals are there for, whether it's on the phone to start or in person.
Which is a great suggestion too. And of course, as we always say, it's not a sign of weakness. We want to show that certainly when someone is seeking help, that they are showing strength. Kelly, I want to follow up with you, because sometimes people experience these things, but they're not really sure. And can you explain? I know the MHA, of course, we both work here, but the MHA has a screening tool. So can you describe the screening tool, how people would access it, and how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a free and anonymous mental health screening tool. It's right on our website. You can find it by going to MHAWNY.org/screening. The mission of the program is to raise awareness of mental health disorders and encourage individuals to participate in a screening for a variety of different mental health disorders. Early detection and intervention is really the key with this tool, since many times the screening is the first step in recognizing that a person may be experiencing some signs and symptoms of mental illness. So we get the screening offered to us through Mental Health America, and it's used to help individuals understand and learn more about their mental health and where they are currently. So there's a variety of different screenings you can take on our site. We have ones for depression, anxiety, bipolar, addiction, PTSD, psychosis, and eating disorders. The screening isn't a diagnostic, so I just want to make that clear, but it is a great starting point for someone who might be feeling a little different and noticing some changes in how they're feeling, and they want to take that as the first step in figuring out what's going on.
Yeah, and I think the thing to reinforce, and you said it, it's anonymous. So it's not like you're going to be sharing this with anyone. They don't even take the specific information. I mean, I think if I recall correctly, and correct me on this, Kelly, that they just look at the total numbers. They might report out how many people have taken the screening, but they don't know specific names. They don't keep that information. So it is anonymous,
right?
And you can do it safely.
Yep.
And so I would say that's a great tool that someone can use, as you said, if they're not feeling comfortable with things, how they're doing, and then maybe not sure why things are happening. And it's always good just to get this information and use it as a way to identify, maybe I should seek help. And tell me more, Kelly, about the service that the MHA provides if someone wants to seek help, to follow up. Say they want to take the screening, and once again, we're talking about depression today, so maybe they have indications they do have depression. How would they follow up with the MHA?
Yeah, so you can call us at the MHA. We are available Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 4:30. You call our main phone line. It's 716-886-1242. And when you do call us, you'll reach one of our information and referral specialists, and we'll help guide you in the right direction. So we provide information and community resources to individuals, families, anyone who's seeking help. You might be looking to start your journey with a counselor or a psychiatrist. So if your depression test did say, you should follow up with someone, you would give us a call, and then we could help you find that counselor or therapist. And you can call us for other issues too if you're looking for maybe just starting by joining a support group. So there's a bunch of peer-led support groups in the community that we could help you find as well. We also help with legal issues. There's a bunch of different things we can help you out with. So we basically will just do a quick intake with you. We'll determine what your need is, and then we will find the most appropriate resource in the community based on your specific need and location.
And of course, one thing to mention too is that the great thing about the MHA is that it's as I always like to say, an unbiased resource. In other words, we don't point people to any agency or organization other than just knowing, okay, this is what you need, and we try to meet people where they're at, like the saying goes. Mm-hmm. I do want to remind our viewers that you can type a question in the comment box if you have something for one of our panelists. So please feel free to share your questions, and I'm sure we'll try to get to them as we can. So make sure you do that. If you're also, so BJ, I know you talked about before that you're a person who has experienced depression. So how would you describe, you said a little bit about it already, but how would you describe how it's affected you personally? And also in terms of self-advocacy, you describe yourself as being a self-advocate. How would you define that? So first, how has the depression affected you?
Well, it's forced me to change some of my habits. Like if I don't have a successful day, I have to tell myself there's always tomorrow. There's always tomorrow. There's no there's no issue that I need to beat myself up about. There's always tomorrow. You can go back at it tomorrow, and the advocacy is important for your entire life, because not only with me having a developmental disability, but having the depression as a diagnosis, I have to advocate to get the services I need in a timely manner and let people know that today is probably not a good day to talk to me about things going on with my developmental disability, because when both are compounded together, it gets very overwhelming. So I have to be willing to say to somebody who might be supporting me, I need a break right now. I need to take that break. I need to take some time. So give me time. It's not always about the billable that you can get from me when you provide me services because of my developmental disability. You know, I'm a human being, but I had to step up and say, I need to take some time for me. That's where the advocacy started. Then I could take care of myself better, you know, and it's all about me taking care of myself first so I can help advocate for others. And I had to learn that, and it took a while for me to be okay with being duly diagnosed, because having one diagnosis was bad enough, the obvious diagnosis, but the hidden diagnosis of depression was worse, because people would treat me differently if they knew I had the diagnosis of depression, which I don't mind saying now, because the more I let it out, the more other people can see us talking today, and maybe I should go get some help. That's why I'm here. I'm not here to hide it anymore, because your mental health diagnoses are nothing to hide. You're a human being. You deserve to have that good life. So please remember that.
I love that. You deserve to have that good life. That's a message for everybody about our mental health. So, Josh, I have a question for you. And this came out from our audience. And once again, if you have a question, please feel free to share in the comments box. So the question is, how can you approach someone who you may think is struggling without being intrusive? And can you do it at work, or is it crossing a line? So that's a really challenging couple of questions.
Sure, and that can get a little bit tricky when it comes to boundaries and time and place to have what oftentimes can be a difficult conversation. I do think, though, we have to fight through the impulse of not wanting to discuss it, but keeping someone's respect for their personal information and what is going on in mind when we do that. So, for example, a busy workplace environment where there's many other people around is probably not the best time to approach someone about very personal details, whatever that might be, because that person may not want to discuss it. Although it is important to just directly try to address if we know someone is acting differently. And I'm assuming this question is getting at, I think there's somebody there and I don't know how to address what's going on, but I'm worried about them. I think they could use some help. That's not an easy conversation, but I think it's such a necessary one. And we would want to just make sure that we're respecting that person's environment when we do it. So, for example, maybe that's not the time and place when you're noticing it, but ask them in a way to say, hey, do you have some time where we could talk? I just wanted to check in with you. And then, even though it's an uncomfortable conversation, fight through that gut instinct of like, I don't really want to say this. Say it, because we don't know what's going on with the other person. You could be the first person who's even mentioning it. And it's that kind of breaking through that stigma of, I don't want to even go there. I don't even want to ask. I don't want to know. You really need to know, because sometimes that's what is the difference maker with getting help, because it is very sometimes shameful, although I would argue it is not needing to be so. But because of that stigma, we can feel like we're less than of a person, that somehow we are not capable. Yet I would flip that around and say it's stronger of a person to get some help, to fight through that and address it. But sometimes you could be that extra person in that situation to ask the right question. But again, time and place becomes important with that, because these are sensitive topics, and we wouldn't want to push someone away when we're really trying to help. Sometimes we don't know how to help, and that can be frustrating as a person from the outside saying, I don't know what to do. Ask, can I talk to you? Can I check in with you? Don't just assume they don't want to talk about it. Let them say that they don't want to talk about it, and then offer an alternative. Okay, if you don't want to talk to me, you can even say, I noticed that you're doing X, Y, and Z. You're not feeling exactly the same way. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm noticing it. If you need help, this is someplace you can call, even if you don't want to talk to me. The conversation doesn't have to end there. There can always be an alternative.
I like that answer. In fact, that points to really a lot what BJ was saying earlier about approaching someone, not being afraid to do that, and understanding that someone might be struggling, and they may not be willing to come out and talk about it. But if you approach them, they may be more likely to open up.
Absolutely.
So if you're just tuning in, I'm Karl Shallowhorn from the Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition, and I'm joined by Josh Magier, Psychiatric Case Manager at the Erie County Medical Center, BJ Stasio, President of the Board of Directors of SANI's, the Self-Advocacy Association of New York State, and Kelly Miskovski, Director of Community Outreach and Information and Referral at the Medical Advocates of West New York. I just want to kind of go ahead and remind you also, you can visit our website at letstalkstigma.org to take the pledge to end stigma. Also, if you're connected with a business, organization, or faith community, you can become an organizational member of the Anti-Stigma Coalition, and you can find that information on the website under the Members tab. Josh and BJ, I just want to get your opinions on maybe the best ways, and I talked about this already about seeking treatment, but also, BJ, from your lived experience, and I don't want to, we'll talk about boundaries and getting personal, but I know you said you have lived with depression. How did you go about seeking treatment?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Karl. It became not manageable for me. It overwhelmed my life and stopped me from doing the things I enjoyed. I didn't want to go to work. I didn't see that I was doing a good job, and I said, this isn't the way I want to live. I need help, because I know I'm better than that, and I know I have value to people as everybody does. So I just started calling around. I utilized my care coordinator, which is the person who helps me manage my services for my developmental disability. I said, I think I'm having a mental health crisis. Where can I go to get some help? I have a good team of people around me. And she was really helpful. And she said, well, maybe we should try. I go to Endeavor, for example, Endeavor Health, and they've been really helpful to me, because the first thing that we had to do to help me deal with the depression was help me deal with stuff that I was dealing with my disability and my past. I had to deal with that, because that was locked away, even hidden from me, so I didn't have to deal with it. I locked it away so I didn't have to deal with it. But once I dealt with it, it was a weight that was taken off my shoulders, and I could learn to cope and function with it, because it's not good to let things sit and lock them up, because even though you lock them up and you think you don't have to deal with them, they're with you. So it's better that you deal with them and get them out. And I've been receiving help from Endeavor for about 2 years now. It's going to be an ongoing process, and I had to be invested in helping myself so I could then help others. And that's what I'm doing. And I'm not ashamed to say now that I have depression. Admittedly, when I didn't know what was going on, I'll freely admit it, because I have a obvious disability. I didn't need to compound it by bringing up that I had another problem, but I needed to do that to make myself better. Not that I'm better, I've learned to cope and deal with it on a regular basis.
You said a lot there, BJ, about the idea of getting that help, because we know that if you don't do anything about it, and I think Josh would agree, it will very possibly get worse. Not all the time, but we know that it's like any other medical condition. If you don't treat it early, it will persist. And an idea you also said about being a process. And we know that about recovery. Recovery is a process. Getting treatment is a process. It's not overnight, but it's available. And so, Josh, can you follow up with that?
Sure. I think on the practical side of things, it's sometimes hard to know what to do, how to get started, and so from my perspective, anyway, in terms of seeking treatment and how to go about that, it's oftentimes the most frustrating and difficult part is just getting started. Because if you're willing to address it, or at least are at a point where you know you need to make some changes, get some help, the rest flows more naturally than people think, because just being present and having the initial conversation to get the process started is oftentimes the biggest hurdle, both mentally, just getting up whether it's the courage, whether it's just talking to someone about difficult stuff in our lives, but then also practically of like, how do I get there? How do I even begin that conversation? What resources do I have? Then there's other things like my insurance and how long will this take, and what kind of commitment do I need to make? And that can be a very scary experience. So practically, whether it's calling a hotline, such as crisis services, just to have an initial conversation, calling mental health advocates to get that initial resource information, whether it's walking in to have an initial urgent care type clinical assessment or initial counseling session. And sometimes it's helpful to bring in a trusted person. I know I was talking about that earlier, where this is a scary experience. So having someone accompany you for that first visit into the waiting room, even, they don't have to necessarily come in with you, but just have someone there for you so you can not feel so intimidated by the process. And the rest, again, will flow, I think, after that. And then hopefully whoever you're working with will be addressing those barriers as you go. But my experience tells me it's that start that oftentimes is the toughest part. So that's why we want to encourage that and cut through those barriers.
That's a great piece of advice and a great suggestion, Josh. Thank you. I have a bit of a tougher question, Josh, and I'm going to ask you again as a not a follow-up, but another question that came from the audience. And again, if you have a question, please feel free to submit it through the comments box. If a person, say, maybe they have a medical condition, for instance, and it's affecting them and they're developing depression, and they've tried to talk to their employer about it, maybe, and the employer isn't supportive, what would you recommend then? I mean, how do you handle that if you're trying to convey that it's affecting you, and it could affect your work, and we know that can happen. We know that, as I mentioned earlier in our opening comments, depression is the #1 cause of workplace absenteeism. So how do you handle that?
It's a very good question, and it's tough because we don't always get to pick our supervisor or our employer. So specifically, we have to do our best to work with our coworkers and our supervisors best we can. It is absolutely true that a legitimate medical condition that affects our lives can affect our mental health. Absolutely, they go hand in hand. If someone has a serious condition that affects their well-being, if they need to take medication, if they have a physical ailment, if they have just medical concerns in general, it is very much common that could lead to depression or anxiety or similar types of issues. And there's no way that would not affect the workplace and work performance in a lot of ways. If your employer is not either accepting of that or supportive of that, and just downplays the significance and just maybe wants you to do what you're supposed to do anyway, and discounts that as a valid reason for either accommodation or just even a conversation over workplace responsibilities or expectations, you have a few options, but sometimes it's a tough conversation. I'll be honest; it's not always easy to work through. But if you're working with someone, even if not a mental health professional, a primary doctor or a physician who is aware of your medical diagnosis, it would be helpful to get them to advocate on your behalf with regard to your workplace responsibilities. because if there is legitimacy to that, if there is something going on that affects mental health as well, you'd want to get people behind you to advocate for you, because sadly, some employers are not going to take what you say at face value, especially when it comes to mental health. It fits right back into stigma because it's hidden. Now, a physical disability might be easily documented and easily noticed, but a mental health disability or condition like depression, you don't obviously see it, yet it's there. And so getting something to support that with the employer, EAP, which I know was briefly mentioned, could be a way to address that as well. So if there's any kind of employment assistance program that would allow for counseling or allow for some additional support that way, that could help the employer understand the nature of what is going on. But ultimately, I would always say, and this is not easy either, if you have explored those avenues and your employer is still making a workplace environment that is not accepting of what is going on, I'm not saying to leave that job immediately, but you may need to, unfortunately, make plans to work at a place that can understand what you're going through, because otherwise that is just going to continually be a problem and build and make the depression potentially worse. That'd be my last option after trying everything else. Although for some people that might be the best option, because I will say not every employer is understanding of mental health. There is that stigma. And I always would say it might be a tougher immediate choice, but better long-term choice to find an employer who at least understands where you're coming from and can make accommodations as necessary. Just otherwise it's not sustainable.
That's a really well answered question there, Josh. Thank you for that. And thank you for the audience member for submitting that. Kelly, I wanted to follow up with you on that, to kind of dovetail off of what Josh was talking about with employers. Can you describe if there's any programs at MHA that educate employers about mental health that they might be able to use to inform their supervisors, inform their managers about what to look for or how to handle things?
Yeah, we do have a program. It's called Mindset, and it is available to train supervisors on how to work with their employees. And we can also train the entire staff as well. And it's really just about keeping people healthy in the workplace and knowing more about mental health and mental illnesses, and really just educating the whole staff about it. Because many places, like I live in it every day, so we know this world, but I think there's a lot of places out there that they just don't know. So this is a good way to get your employers thinking about these situations and getting the proper education that every employer should have. So if you want to look into that, you can contact me by calling that number I listed earlier, which is 886-1242. And I can help you out with telling you more about the trainings that are available for Mindset.
Excellent. And I think, as far as I recall, the Mindset program is something that is suitable for organizations of any size.
Yes, it is.
That's great. So
I think they're quick trainings. They're either like a half hour or an hour long.
And that's a great point too, Kelly. A lot of times employers are worried about taking too much time out of the day and releasing employees for these kind of trainings. There might even be the possibility of what lunch and learn or brown bag sessions that they can do. And now we have this Zoom, these type of platforms that can do this as well. So there are all kinds of possibilities, I think, with the Mindset program, that if you're an employer, if you work in an organization, you can suggest it even to your boss or to someone there to make this happen. That's great. Excellent. So Josh, now I talked about the idea of early intervention. So when we discuss depression specifically, we know that the idea of early intervention is important. How early, and I talked about how early it can manifest. And of course, BJ, maybe you can even put some input into this too. But if you've never had it before, we know COVID has really impacted people like nothing we've ever seen in our lifetime, certainly. And some people develop depression because of COVID. So if you've never had this happen before, because some people do have a pre-existing condition that may be watching or know about this, but if you've never experienced it and you're afraid of what might happen, how would you recommend that they handle this? And like I said, there's things they can do, but What would your response be to that, Josh?
Sure. So the whole reason we want early intervention is because we are going to continually be holding on to all of this stuff, whether or not someone is asking us about it. It's affecting us just the same. And the earlier we can get at it and the earlier we can let some of that go with regard to depression and all the associated feelings and disruptions in our life, it gives us the chance to recover that much quicker and that much easier. It is not impossible if it's taken longer. It's still the same, but that's also part of it. It's the same process. Whether we start earlier or we start later, I would give the same recommendations. But unfortunately, for some people, if they're holding on to the depression too long, it will not only just be the emotional changes, the behavioral changes, and the physical changes, but then we might be talking about safety issues, which eventually we don't want for anyone, because then that's an extra step. We have to ensure someone is safe, not at risk of harm to themselves or anyone else when it comes down to treatment. It's, again, very possible, very encouraged to still get the help, but the earlier we can get at it, the less likely it has gotten to that serious state, and the less intervention might be needed to get the positive result. So earlier is better for those kind of things, just reducing the overall difficult nature of mental health treatment for many folks. And that's why the knowledge is so important, like just knowing what we're looking for.
And of course, I just want to mention too, Josh, you mentioned the safety concern. If someone is in a point of crisis, we do have crisis services locally, and that number is 716-834-3131. Or if you are watching this and you're outside of Erie County, you can contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. And those are the numbers you can call, that you can talk to a crisis counselor and get those immediate responses. And then in our county, as you see, the number is 716-285-3515. The point, and I think you'll all agree, is to not wait, to call and speak to someone who can walk you through that process. BJ, I once again, I'm trying not to get too sensitive with you, but I do know that you've had some experience. Have you ever been in a crisis yourself where you felt you've had, maybe not even call crisis services, but you really felt like, I need to talk to someone now? I mean, this is important.
Well, that's a very good question, Karl. And in the developmental disability community and in the service system, we have a thing that we utilize to help us get our services in the developmental disabilities field called a circle of support. So I've developed that other circle of support, but it's funny. Those same people who are on my circle of support to help me get services for my developmental disability turned out to be the people that I lean on when I'm having a rough day, just to talk about it and get it out. Because even though I talk for a living, I don't like really to talk about myself. So those people who I trust, like Josh was talking about, people who I trust, I go to immediately and say, I'm having a bad day. This happened today. Can we just talk and not really talk about my feelings? And maybe the feelings will come out during the naturalness of the conversation. Because I'm not going to openly say I'm feeling depressed today. What my circle understands about me is let me bring it out and don't judge. Just be the support that I need. I'm not looking for you to judge me because I'm having a bad day. I'm asking for the support, and my circle of support understands that. That's why I come to them. And we might not come to an agreement on what's going on, but at least I feel better for having let that heavy weight out, because it could sit and fester for days when it really doesn't need to.
BJ, rather, I'm sorry. You are really bringing so much value to our conversation from your experience that I think if anyone's watching and they're maybe dealing with these things right now, what you're saying, it's gold for me. That's really very valuable. So thank you so much for sharing honestly and openly. I do have a question that came in once again through our comments, and if you have a question, please feel free to type into the comments box. So this is for anyone here, but this is a common question that we hear, but how do you help a loved one who might be experiencing depression and they may be reluctant to seek help? What are some do's and don'ts to approach someone that you really care for to get help? Maybe Josh, you might be able to help.
Sure. Just a few things to start with. It can be so difficult to know how to approach someone. It's not a fun conversation typically if we're talking about depression. It's difficult and there's a lot of emotions involved. I definitely would listen to that person without judgment, because to a person who is experiencing any sort of mental health crisis or depression, that is real to them. It may not seem as if it would cause the depression that it is to us from the outside, but to them, we just want to listen and not judge whether or not someone should be feeling a certain kind of way. We want to just accept where they're coming from and be there to hear it. In terms of a don't, I would just say don't assume anything, really. We want to have those direct conversations, whether it's about safety, whether it's about what someone may or may not be doing for themselves. Especially, it's quite common for someone to be putting on either a brave face or just kind of acting like things are okay, but they may not be totally okay, and we can tell. So cutting straight into, are you feeling this way? Are you doing this? Are you not doing this? And not assuming. And not being afraid of what the answer is. Sometimes we're afraid of what they're going to say. I would be here to say that it does not change what they are feeling. Whether they tell us or not, they're still feeling the way they're feeling. We may not be happy about the answer, of course. If someone's struggling with depression, that's not something we're looking for, but it doesn't change the fact that it's happening. And so we don't want to assume that they are or not okay.
Thank you. Kelly, I know we're talking a lot about professional treatment and professional support. Tell us about support groups. I know that's nothing we really haven't touched on much, but I know that MHA has information about support groups. So why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I would like to say that one thing you could help a loved one do is help them find support, because making that initial call could be something that they really don't want to do. So I answer the phones here. So I have a lot of people that call that say that they're calling for a friend or family member. So that could be a good thing that you could help out with. But yeah, we have a lot of support groups at the MHA, and there's also other ones throughout the community. But we have some that are virtual and some that meet right in person at our building. They're all listed on our website under the tab at the top that says support. On that page, you will find all of the support groups at MHA, and then there's also a link to a full directory for Erie County support groups for adults. And they're peer-led, and only peers are allowed in the groups. So
can you describe a peer for us?
Yeah, so a peer would be someone that has the diagnosis. So if the support group is for OCD, the facilitator has OCD, and all of the members will also have an OCD diagnosis. So that is to make sure that people feel comfortable disclosing information in that group. So everyone is very understanding and non-judgmental, and it's just a great place to meet other people who are going through similar challenges that you are, and to talk about what works for you, what they do to feel better, and make some friends even too.
That's awesome. And of course, support groups are wonderful because it provides almost for a common bond that people can develop. And there's a saying, the therapeutic value of one person helping another with that similar challenge is without parallel. We kind of heard that, right? That we know that professional support is important, but to have someone who has walked in your shoes, as we say, who knows that experience, definitely can be very helpful. So thank you for that, Kelly. BJ, so we know that there might be people watching right now who might be experiencing depression. What would you say to them if they're hesitant to seek help?
First, I would say to them, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. You just need help working through it. Don't be ashamed. Everybody has issues. Everybody has problems. Don't be ashamed. It's just something you have to work through, and there are professionals out there, and you might not get better as quick as you might like or somebody around you might like, but at least you have to start somewhere. You have to crack that door open so the depression doesn't overwhelm and overtake your life, because you have value and you are important. You have value not only to yourself, but to your loved ones and those in the community who know you and care about you. So please take care of yourself and remember that you have value, and it's okay. It's okay. Like, it took me years to admit that I had a problem, but like I said, it was overwhelming my life and stopped me from living my life. And I want to lead that richer life. So I had to help myself lead the richer life that I want for myself, because nobody was going to do it for me. I had to do it for myself first.
Which of course, as you said, that's the whole point of advocacy, right? You kind of learn to speak for yourself.
Yeah.
Now, Josh, of course, you work at ECMC in the Help Center. Can you describe the Help Center? Maybe what someone would do if they want to come to seek services from you?
Absolutely. So, in short, the Help Center, the way I describe it, is like an urgent care for mental health. So, if you are willing to have an initial meeting with a counselor to discuss everything we're talking about here, and then to get some direction as to next steps, to link with services, to make sure you're okay, and even just sometimes to have someone to speak about all these issues that you're dealing with in the moment, you would just simply walk in during those times. I see they're listed up there, but it's Monday through Friday from 8 in the morning until 10 in the evening, and then on weekends and holidays from 9 in the morning till 10 in the evening. You don't need an appointment for that. You would just come to ECMC. We're at the Outpatient Behavioral Health Building, which is just to the side of the main hospital building. You can call first if you would like, if you have questions, if you're not sure about what to expect. Someone can talk you through what to expect a little bit more specifically, just in case just coming in like that seems uncomfortable. But the idea is to not only give that help, but also to prevent more care from being needed. So it's difficult enough to be dealing with these issues, but then on top of that, some people, speaking of early intervention, they hold on to things so long that it's very hard to have a conversation about it. It's almost past that point. And they need more help. Some people do need to be seen in the emergency room here for mental health crises, and sometimes in cases do need to be admitted to the hospital because it reaches that point. And we would love to avoid that for people. That is so stressful on top of everything else going on. In some cases, unfortunately, it is needed for safety and for treatment purposes, but we'd love to get you here before that. We'd love to be able to address it, talk about safety, talk about needs, and get you linked up with counseling, whether it's here at ECMC or anywhere in the community. We usually look at location and other factors like that to make sure whatever linkage that we discuss is sustainable. We want you to be able to go there. We don't want there to be a financial burden, for example. So we want, if you have insurance or you need help getting insurance, we talk through some of that, because I've heard it many times, I don't know if I can afford to go. We want to try to address that in any way possible within what we can do here. And just even if you have to come here a few times, it's not limited to a one time and then never come back. Although the point of the Help Center is not to replace counseling. It's meant to be more of an urgent care, in the same way that you would not go to a medical urgent care as a substitute for your primary doctor. You would go as a supplement. That is what we would do as well. Get you pointed in the right direction to a more permanent provider, and hopefully stay out of the hospital as well.
Right. Excellent. And I think the Help Center is a wonderful resource for that purpose. And I think it's one of the, I know there's other ways to do it, but that's a really efficient way to get the help immediately if you need it. That's great, Jess. Thanks for describing. Kelly, I want to just go back to you before we give everyone a chance to wrap up with a last comment. So you've talked a lot about the services the MHA provides and the awesome things that we do here. What I want to ask is, can you give an example maybe of, and I mean, this is maybe in broad terms, but maybe of a call that you received where you were able to guide someone, and I don't know if do you ever hear follow-ups from people saying, oh, I was able to connect, thank you. Can you give a broad example maybe about that? Not without obviously naming too much identifiable information.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of our calls are people who are looking for counseling and they're not currently seeing anyone for treatment and they really just don't know where to go at all. So what we would do is we'll ask them where they live. So we'll try and find a place that's close to them, make sure that they have transportation, and then we will give them a few options. We won't just give them one place that they can go just in case for any reason they can't get into that one. So we'll give them a few different options for counseling, and then we do check back in with people as well. So we'll follow up and make sure that they were helped by our information and that they did follow up with one of the referrals that were given to them. So I'd say that is the most common reason people call us, just they don't know where to go for services. It's a hard system to navigate, especially if you are just experiencing something for the first time.
Absolutely. And of course, that's the thing we want to reinforce is that if you don't know where to go, then certainly MHA is a great resource. Also, don't forget about the Let's Talk Stigma website, where you can go under resources. And actually, I think that link was just shown on the screen. It's letstalkstigma.org/the-resources. And if you go to that, you can certainly find some information on our website as well, where you get these things. So I want to give you each an opportunity to provide maybe a minute or so wrap up about our topic today, what we discussed, any last minute suggestions you would give to folks. So BJ, let's start with you. No, actually, you know what? I want to wrap up with you, BJ. Let's go to Josh first.
Sure. In general, I'm so glad that we're discussing this because depression, it is not obvious, yet it's so impactful on us. And it sometimes creeps in without us realizing. And then all of a sudden we can take a step back and say, we really should not continue living in that way. We really should get some assistance. And so just the talking about it can open that door and can let that help be available, because you can't help something that isn't discussed. And the stigma around mental health, I often say when speaking to people, it's not as if we're given a choice to say, I would like to have depression or I would not like to have depression. It doesn't go like that. It happens through no fault of our own in terms of things that have affected us. And so I just encourage everyone to have that conversation and ask questions. It's okay to not know. Before we were all in the fields that we are, we didn't know. So it's okay to ask questions and discuss it.
Thank you. Kelly, how about you?
Well, Karl, thank you for having me today. But also similarly to what Josh said, is that I would also like to encourage anyone who is feeling like they don't know where to go or they're feeling off and something might be going on and they don't know who to turn to, maybe to find a family member, a friend, or a trusted person and just start talking to them about what you're experiencing. And don't be afraid to tell someone, because that can be really helpful. Your friend can be encouraging and help you through it. And then if you get to that point, then you can give us a call and we can help guide you and help find treatment for you. And then also, if you maybe don't want to make a phone call first, you could go on our website and take a screening and see what the screening says and go from there. That would be a great starting point.
Thank you. BJ, you get the last word.
Yes, thank you for having me today. This was a very important discussion to have. One thing I want to say about mental health and stigma, it's just what it is. It's another label. And we all live by labels, and we need to stop living by labels and realize that our lives are important not only to us, but to those who love us and to those around us. So don't perpetuate the label and keep it a secret. Get help. Stigma shouldn't be a label. It should be something that you deal with and just address. We don't need more labels. Society puts enough labels on all of us. So we don't need to do that to ourselves or to those who love us.
That is an incredible statement. We don't need more labels. You're absolutely right, BJ. So I just want to remind our audience that you can also help us by addressing stigma by taking the pledge and going to our website at letstalkstigma.org. And if your organization would like to join us in our cause, you can find information on the website by going to the members tab. And so remember, together we can all make this happen. So once again, I'd like to thank our panelists, Josh Magier, Psychiatric Case Manager at the Erie County Medical Center, BJ Stasio, President of the Board of Directors of SANI's, the Self-Advocacy Association of New York State, and Kelly Miskovski, Director of Community Outreach and Information and Referral at the Health Advocates of Western New York. I'd also like to thank the folks behind the scenes, Mike Telesco from Telesco Creative Group for all his technical support, Matt Smith, Chair of the Anti-Stigma Outreach Committee, and Carol Doggett from the Mental Health Advocates of Western New York, and finally, Karen Karashevsky from KKPR Buffalo for their support as well. So be sure to tune in to our next Facebook Live, The State of Stigma, How Trauma and Stress Affect Veterans Across Generations. And that's going to be on Veterans Day, November 11th. So we're still accepting suggestions for our December Facebook Live, which is scheduled for December 15th. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover, please submit your suggestion on the Contact Us page on the Let's Talk Stigma website. So on behalf of the Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition, until next time, I'm Karl Shallowhorn. Be well.